Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the July 21st Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192, governing open meetings. As the province has moved into Phase 3 of the reopening plan, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, I will call up those who have signed up to the podium to address council. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Robertson, I understand we don't have any. A motion for adoption of the agenda, moved by Councillor Martman, seconded by Councillor Hemmens. All those in favour? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have no presentations. We have no delegations that are unrelated to agenda items. And so the first item is 7, report 7A, live fire training center remediation. Chief Doyle, good morning. Welcome electronically.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. Thanks for having me here on behalf of Nanaimo Fire Rescue to report on the live fire training center remediation staff decision. Purpose of the report is just to provide you an update on the repairs needed to the Nanaimo Fire Rescue's live fire training facility. Background on this issue is that Nanaimo Fire Rescue currently conducts live fire training, and that the training center was constructed in 1985. This training is required to ensure personnel are prepared and ready to respond to fire emergencies and perform their duties safely and effectively. NFR's Live Fire Training Center has been in place for 36 years and has been home to NFR's live fire training. It hosts external stakeholders who come here to perform live fire training as well. Unlike many other fire departments, Nanaimo had the forethought to build the Live Fire Training Center to promote effective training and reduce costs as compared to training being conducted. As recommended by Herald, to ensure Herald Engineering to ensure structural integrity, due to the extreme heat that the training center is inspected every year, and a detailed, more comprehensive engineering review is performed at 5-year intervals. At the most recent comprehensive engineering review conducted in 2021, Herald Engineer reported that some of the areas in the building needed remediation due to structural damage. Specifically, they stated the following: concrete cracking, surface concrete's falling, deep concrete's falling, exposed reinforced steel, loose heat-resistant panels, corrosion of heat restraint panel suspension framework, damaged doors and window structures, and damaged heat-resistant panels. They speculate that for the existing building, it's most likely that most of the damage happened within the last 5 years. Therefore, it's reasonable to presume that a like-new structure will function sufficiently without the need for repair for 30 years. However, the term like structure is a key aspect of this determination. The current structure was likely designed to the standard of the day in 1985, which intentionally or unintentionally provided very good resistance to negative effects of carbonation. This is due to the large amount of concrete cover, as the walls were provided only one mat of reinforced steel centered in the wall. If that structure was to be designed today, it may require 2 mats of reinforced steel, which would substantially decrease the concrete cover, therefore decrease the expected time to reverse damage. So specific attention will be required to avoid the design pitfalls if a building is to be replaced. Herald Engineering thinks that it's reasonable to say that the thresholds for, if we do the repairs, cost outweighing the replacement cost will be reached in approximately 20 years. Currently, NFR performs live fire training on shift, with the exception of a small contingent of in-house instructors paid to facilitate the live fire training. If the Nanaimo does not repair the training center and firefighters are trained outside the city at live fire training facility elsewhere, it would require training to be scheduled off shift. Firefighters would be remunerated at our training rate, which is straight time, which is definitely a benefit, but still a big cost. In addition to travel costs, food costs, instructor costs, facility rentals. Also, due to the distance from Nanaimo, the cost incurred if we had to abandon the training session, and the unavailability of firefighters kind of make it unfeasible to do that. Also, so in contrast, if Nanaimo firefighters were trained on shift in Nanaimo, like they are right now, they're available to respond to emergency incidents, although they are somewhat delayed because they have all their gear out. There are no wages associated with the on-duty trainees. There's a higher probability that off-duty firefighters are available for emergency call-in, larger incidents, because they're not out of the community training. When NFR performs live fire training in Nanaimo, we also gain the opportunity to perform live fire training with a greater frequency because we're performing the training on shift and there are no overtime costs. And in-house expertise is strengthened amongst our staff and our instructors, which increases morale, safety, and it also enhances our internal practices. The other thing that we have to consider is that by repairing the live fire training center, the city also has the opportunity to generate revenue through facility rentals to other departments. Likewise, if Vancouver Island Emergency Response Academy expands, the possibility to generate additional revenue through new programming supported by the live fire training center can be further explored. There are some financial considerations, and there is a cost to maintaining the fire center. However, the alternative, training fire rescue personnel elsewhere, is also very costly. When travel, wages, backfill, emergency response, and other logistical concerns are weighed, the picture becomes clear. For example, if Nanaimo were to utilize a center, say in Comox Fire Training Center, they exist elsewhere too, but just for example, Comox, the estimated annual cost would be approximately $104,700 to train all of the firefighters one session per year. And I don't have it in this, but referencing back, if we were to train the firefighters here, we wouldn't train them just once a year. We try to train them at least twice a year, so we gain that experience. If the remediation work is not performed, NFR wishes to continue the training personnel in Nanaimo, alternative facility options have also been considered. Firstly, Nanaimo could build a like-for-like structure, as I referenced before. This structure would be new, and gas training props would be incorporated, because that is the standard of the day. I don't know that there would be any fire training center now that wouldn't be built without gas training props. So the estimated cost for that structure is $1.238 million, ranging up to $1.299,500,000. With the additional cost of burning props at $491,900. Another option would to be a modular facility and remove the existing structure. So the difference, just to explain these two, like for like, if you're not familiar with the training center, is a large concrete structure with steel, and it's got unique rooms and stairwells, and there's a lot of fidelity built into that structure. Whereas because of the cost, that was probably cost prohibitive. So a lot of departments are moving to a modular type of facility, and that would be there's steel sea cans, gas props operating. And the estimated cost to construct a modular facility and remove the existing facility is estimated $880,700. The third option, which may be asked about, is potentially moving the training center elsewhere to another location. And we have thought a lot about that, but due to the feasibility of relocating the fire training to another site, a comprehensive study has not been following. Likely, if we were to build elsewhere, we'd have to build somewhere. Probably wouldn't be in the core of our city. So there's some operational response time issues with that. Therefore, off-duty training costs would be similar to training personnel at a facility elsewhere. Because if we were to build a training center not central to Nanaimo, we would have to make sure that we had personnel in Nanaimo to respond to the emergency. Whereas when we train our personnel right in the center of town there, they are available for response. The cost associated with demolishing the fire training center and to restore the current site. The other one is real estate costs, significant real estate costs. And the other one are significant construction costs for a new facility with the accompanying infrastructure, such as fencing, classroom facilities, storage, washroom facilities, self-contained breathing apparatus fill stations, and parking. Because all those things currently exist in and around our current fire training center. Lastly, if the remediation work is performed, it puts the current facility in a state of readiness for future conversion to gas. By converting this facility to gas, it would eliminate the smoke currently produced by burning solid fuels, which would be safe for the adjacent community and public works. Importantly, if public works undergoes future development of their site, converting the live fire training facility will strengthen the development potential to utilize the south end of the public works site due to the elimination of smoke. The estimated cost to convert the current live fire training to gas at a future date is estimated at $491,900 and is not currently part of the 2022 to 2031 draft project. So when we get down to the options, the recommendation is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council add a live fire training facility remediation project in the amount of $275,300 to the 2021 budget funded from the General Asset Management Reserve Fund. The advantages to this proposal is that we get to continue to train firefighters in the city of Nanaimo. We avoid the associated yearly cost for NFL personnel to train at another facility outside Nanaimo. We continue to strengthen our live fire training expertise and our safety and our best practices amongst our own staff. We have an opportunity to train our personnel at greater frequency because there are no overtime wage costs associated with that because we're training on duty. We maintain emergency response readiness because our firefighters are in the community, and it's the lowest cost option. There are some disadvantages, as stated in the the discussion portion where it said Herald Engineering speculates, is that just unforeseen repair costs. This building will continue to go under inspections yearly and at 5-year intervals. So they're anticipating, there will be a maintenance budget with that, and that you never know if there are other costs with a more aged facility versus a new facility. So the final financial impact is a concrete repair work is $275,300. The increased an annual maintenance budget in the 2022 to 26 financial plan, and that we would need to amend the financial plan, the 2021 to 2025 financial plan, at a future date to include the project. The second option is that Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council direct staff to perform live fire training at a facility outside the city of Nanaimo. The advantages of this, we continue to meet our objectives, training objectives, and train our personnel. And there's also no additional facility maintenance costs. Those are baked into the cost that we pay a contractor for another facility to maintain. The disadvantages to that are annual live fire training costs are significant and outweigh repairing the facility. Not in the first year, obviously, but at $104,000 or an estimated cost of $104,700 year over year, it wouldn't take long to exceed the cost of repairs. Firefighters are only trained one session per year. Our in-house expertise is diminished, and our future costs are also determined by an external provider. So we have less control over that. But as I stated earlier, the financial impact of that external training is $104,700. That's concludes my report. Is there any
Thank you very
questions?
much, Chief Doyle. Questions from Council? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Chief Doyle. I actually have two questions. Is there any estimate of how long the facility would be not usable during the repair process? And secondly, is the facility currently being used to train members of other fire departments?
Okay, so the first question, is it being used right now? Sorry, Councillor Turley?
No, it was during the repair process.
Oh, okay.
Is there an estimate how long it would be out of commission?
Okay. No, we don't have an estimate on that yet, Councillor. But if this were approved, we would get working on it, and they would be able to provide that estimate.
Thank you. And then the second question was, is it being used by members of other fire departments for training?
Through your worship, Councillor Turley, it's not currently. We've had to suspend that training as well. So COVID has been certainly disrupted our lives. One of the things that has unfortunately but fortunately helped us is that because of our COVID practices, we've actually had to suspend our live fire training because of proximity, and it's heavy breathing, sweating, close proximity. So we actually had to, and that we need multiple staff there to perform this training. So because of COVID, we've had to suspend that training. And so we found this inspection was performed while we've had our training suspended. So we were lucky that it didn't actually disrupt, COVID disrupt this training as much as the facility. So currently it's not being used, is the short answer.
Thank you.
But we would like to add to that, as we emerge hopefully from COVID, as it seems like with vaccination rates, and I don't want to predict, but it seems like it's improving, that we would like to be able to resume this training as soon as possible once it's safe to do so. It would be nice once we can reestablish good safety practices and get our personnel training, this facility is ready. So we would be pushing to get it repaired as soon as possible. And with that, would be the consideration once it's repaired to reopen it to other fire departments, facility rent, and then explore opportunities for other programming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Bonner next.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chief Doyle. A couple of things. In your recommendations, even though we talked about in the report, you don't mention replacing the building as one of the options. And I'm wondering if it's a possibility of looking at maybe in the near future, because it's quite possible there's grants from the federal government or provincial government that might help pay for a facility there. Some of the other things that's not talked about is if we decided to go out of town for training, that would then free up that amount of space. And I'm just wondering, as the Public Works Department, do they need that space in terms of, could they utilize that space in terms of the expansion that we're looking to do with there? Could we sell the property? There's a whole bunch of variables here. Honestly, I'm fine with just repairing it and carrying on. I'm just wondering if we've looked at some of these other options.
Yeah, here why don't I, through your worship, Councillor Bonner, maybe I'll address the cost-benefit analysis first of replacing the facility versus repairing it. The first one I can't speak to is the grants, so I apologize, but I'd have to probably look to someone else to help me out with the grants. But in terms of the cost to replace it, the two options, first off, the like-for-like structure, there's Herald Engineering speaks to that it probably wouldn't require repairs for decades, like significant repairs. But the one thing that if we built it to new construction standards right off the bat would be that just because of the type of construction they used before, there was a lot more. They speculate there was a lot more protection, concrete cover. So they don't really have. I mean, fire training centers are very unique, so they don't really have a really great estimate on how long a new center would last compared to how long ours has lasted. So ours is very robust. So the cost for that, a like-for-like structure, I just, but approximately 1.8 million with gas incorporated into it, because the estimates went up to 1.3 and then just under 500,000 for gas. So, which is a significant amount compared to if we do the repairs at 275, and even if we were to convert it to gas at a later date, we're under 800,000. So that option is nearly $1 million more. Now, if we went to a modular facility, their Harold estimates that would be about $880,000, I believe. But one of the issues with that, why we prefer repairing this older facility, is because the modular facility really is just sea cans stacked on top of each other, while this one has multiple levels, multiple room types, doors, stairwells, standpipes, the ability to do rope rescue and use it for other training. So it's a much more unique, robust, functional training site. So speaking to, but again, I can't speak to the grants that you referenced. Now, in terms of the public works development, this more comprehensive result this year as opposed to next year, because that's when it when it was scheduled to go ahead for our last one. But yes, this was done so that they could utilize their space as best as much as they needed to. So I won't speak to the development, but they did want to by repairing this and then converting it at a future date, or getting it ready to be converted to gas. That allows consideration for public works if they were going to further develop their site to go on the south end of their site. And they've also spoken to us about potentially taking a small, about 6 meters of land across the south end of their lot that would also that we could definitely provide to them to help them do their project. So in terms of selling the land, yeah, I mean, if Public Works, well, first off, if you wanted to sell it, yeah, if we went somewhere else, that would definitely make that more appealing. And if Public Works wanted the entire site, then that would definitely also support that as well. So, yeah. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Bonner?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That one.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, these actually are for finance, if I may. There's an ongoing maintenance cost, but I don't remember seeing what it is actually was going to be, and I'm assuming that would be a tax increase. And then the other question is regarding the asset management reserve. Since I think this is the first time I've seen this, I'm guessing this wasn't in our plan to use the asset management reserve funds, and we've had conversation in the past that they're not fully funded in a number of years from now. Will taking this money out now affect something else down the road?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So any operating costs, ongoing operating costs, you're correct. That would come from taxation. As far as, I would have to check and see if it was part of the asset management plan. But yeah, conceivably that's where that money would come from. If we pulled it out early, yeah, something else may have to be pushed out, but ultimately it would get done, just not at this time.
And do we actually know what the amount of operating costs are going to be? And can we offset those by renting it out to other fire departments?
The operating costs, I don't have off the top of my head, but that is certainly something we could look at. And we do offset other costs within the fire department from training for other departments, so that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because we're going to vote on this, and that means we're going to vote on a tax increase, and I don't know what it is. So it would be nice to know that later.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, one thing to consider, I think, in terms of a maintenance budget is that I guess the reality is that any facility that we have, that the city of Nanaimo has, will require a maintenance budget. So whether it's a like-for-like structure, repairing this facility, or replacing it with a modular facility, or going elsewhere, having a completely new site, they will all require a maintenance budget. If that does that also help answer the question,
Oh,
to your worship, Councillor Bonner?
fully understand. I just don't know what the budget is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Hemmens?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's no question in my mind that we want to keep our firefighters local and train them here. My question is, we've been hearing for a couple of years now about the potential of cost recovery from our training center. And in the report, it's noted that Comox is the next closest training center for professional firefighters. So I'm curious, I'm guessing COVID is in the mix, but when will we start to see that revenue generation from training from other communities coming here and from the Emergency Response Academy? And what kind of cost recovery can we expect? Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Hemmens, sorry, you cut out there on cost recoveries.
So I'm curious, we've been hearing about cost recovery for a couple of years now, but we haven't seen any figures. When can we expect to see those figures?
The cost recoveries right now, I don't have the actual, I don't have that number in front of me. Right now, they're estimated, I believe, $10,000 or $12,000. So that the actual cost recovery right now for simply facility rentals is it's not a significant factor at this point. But we are looking at exploring other opportunities with Viera. I would say that's in terms of facility rentals. So I think I'm not sure. Yeah, that's in terms of that specific facility. That's how much we are looking to recover yearly. And this year we weren't able to because of COVID. So any future cost recoveries on that would be speculative at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Worship. Question to Chief Doyle and maybe other staff members. In the discussion for the Nanaimo Operations Center, was the location of the fire training center discussed? Like, was there any discussion of changing location or in the design of the new operations center, or is this the spot that we want to maintain it at for the long term?
Through your worship, to I can't see.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Oh, Gesselbrock, excellent, thank you. Yeah, there were it's always been thought of, there's always been considerations about moving it, but as stated, the cost to moving the facility first off is enormous with real estate costs, facilities, and all the infrastructure to successfully run an alternate site. But in terms of the current site, is that it really does work very well operationally because it is essentially attached to station number 2 and is right in the center of town. So when we have our personnel on duty training, they are dead, right in the center of the city, and they can respond north or south. So the way and it really allows us a lot of flexibility. So we can usually have approximately 2 crews there training, and then have our other crews in a state of readiness. And if there's an incident requires all of those resources, they're all in the middle of town. Now, if we were going to move this facility elsewhere, if it wasn't in the core of town, we do run into significant readiness issues. I can't speak exactly to that. We actually have it into the under consideration in the master plan right now. But let's just say that there's a commercial piece of property available at south end of town. Maybe a location like Duke. So if we were, and I don't know that there is, but I'm just saying if we use that as an example, if we train out there, on top of the considerable cost, we also have the proximity to responding to town, which is an enormous amount of time. So we'd essentially have to have those people training out there and then backfill them in the city. It would almost be like training in another community, because once we have those resources too far away, we have to backfill them. So we're in a state of readiness. So I guess the short answer is the Station 2 area is a very central area and is very good response and keeping costs down.
Great, that makes all good sense, and I think the first option there makes the most obvious sense. So have we moved the recommendation already?
I was Councillor Thorpe was going to move it, but I think you're welcome to move
Great,
it.
I'll move the recommendation number 1.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. I have Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I was looking to move in that direction, and I think the report says it all. The advantages of keeping our firefighters right here in town and training them while on duty, it makes sense. And so I'm very supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock, something further?
I did have one more question, just in terms of, you mentioned retrofitting it so that it can run on gas. Can that be done cheaper, like in the process of the remediation? Will that retrofitting for readiness when eventually, we do put it in, is that done concurrently, or is that sort of another decision that needs to happen?
Through your worship, Councillor Gesselbrock, it's definitely something that needs to happen afterwards, or would be a decision that would need to be made afterwards. This is just to repair the facility, but the reality is if Public Works wants to develop their site, especially the south end of their site, we will need to eliminate the smoke so they can be in closer proximity. And gas, that's the best practices in the industry standard, because it reduces gas from not burning solid fuels. So it is safer for the adjacent public works and community and the environment, for that matter, burning gas versus solid fuels. So
right.
That would be something considered at a later date, whether it's public works or if they're held to for other reasons.
Right. So we don't, when we decide to do gas, we don't have to go back in there and tear apart the remediation that we did to retrofit it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, this would just put it in a state of, exactly. Yeah, it's all external. Most of it's external. Sorry.
Before I go to Councillor Hemmons, is there something you wish to add, Mr. Sims, or can we?
No, thanks, Your Worship. Just briefly that both the project team working on the operations center and Nanaimo Fire Rescue have been quite in contact throughout the whole planning exercise. So this is a mutually supportive thing. So the decision was looked at early on around some of the stuff that the chief has covered off, and has been incorporated and thought through as part of the development of the operations plan. And I just wanted to assure council that we're not working in isolation, but we're working together on that.
Councillor Hemmons, you're okay? Thank you. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. That took a while to put that little fire out. Funding request for commercial street revitalization plan. Mr. Lindsay, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship, Council. As you mentioned, we're here this morning to seek the committee's support in adding $150,000 to the 2021-2025 financial plan for a downtown commercial street revitalization plan. Your Worship, I think Council's certainly aware there's been a number of investments by yourselves on projects in the downtown, including active transportation, intersection improvements, public spaces, and not even to speak of the significant amount of private investment that it's occurring in the downtown right now. When it comes to commercial street, as outlined in the report, there's certainly elements of commercial street that are tired or near the end of their life. We've recently had to remove a number of the street trees at some of the intersections, so we have some work that needs to be done to replant those areas. We've had increasing pressures over the years for public spaces on Commercial Street, and that's, I think, reflective in the temporary parklet programs or the temporary patio areas. So there's more demands on outdoor and social space in the downtown. For that reason, and we think it's really time to look at a comprehensive or cohesive public realm plan that will guide the investment in the area for the next number of years. There is a study, a proposed study area, which is attachment A, and maybe if I can, just for the purposes of the introduction, ask that be brought up just for anybody who may be watching from home. Your Worship, this is a project that we've been talking about for a number of years, but we really think the timing is right now. In addition to the above factors, we have, of course, an active and organized BIA, which would be a very significant contributor in this process. So if we are successful in obtaining the committee's support, and this is added to the financial plan, we look forward to working with council, the general public, and the BIA this fall on the development of this urban design strategy for downtown. Certainly happy to...
Lindsay, do you want to get pulled up first before you continue?
It's just attachment A was just the study area. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Your Worship, as shown here, the general area we're talking about is from the intersection of where Victoria Crescent and Albert Street meet, running through up to the cenotaph at Dallas Square with some of the side streets connecting to the waterfront. So as you mentioned, there's been a number of investments in this area, a number of planned investments that are going to be coming over the coming months. And it's really an opportunity to tie those projects together and make sure the work is done in a cohesive manner. Certainly happy to take any questions.
And Councillor Thorpe.
To get it on the floor, Your Worship, I will move the recommendation that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council amend the 2021 to 2025 financial plan to add $150,000 in 2021 for a commercial street revitalization plan funded from payment in lieu of taxes, and I would like to speak to it.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had occasion with the family I think it was Thursday night, to have dinner downtown and walk up and down Commercial Street. It was a beautiful sunny evening, and there was a lot of people out enjoying just the atmosphere of our downtown, which really reminded me of the great potential we have for that area, the heart of our city, especially with the casino reopening, which Councillor Markman is happy about. But it just struck me that anything we can do, I think, within reason to support further revitalization of that area is very worthwhile, and it's certainly something that draws people to our city, to our downtown core. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marmon.
Thank you. And I'm seeing that in the report that we will be engaging Dr. Whitty to redevelop options for Diana Krall Plaza. Any embellishment on that, or?
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a number of projects, Council will remember, it was probably about 18 months ago or more now, that you initiated a number of investments. We called them kind of small, quick wins in the downtown. Projects with the intent of improving the public realm, the ambience in our downtown core. One of those projects that Council agreed to fund at that time was $40,000 towards a project looking at Diana Krall Plaza and options for Diana Krall, and it's being led by Dr. Whitty. It has been postponed for about a year because of COVID. Heavy reliance, I think, on the students and participation up at VIU, so I think that's been delayed for about a year, but the project has just initiated, so hopefully we'll have some results to bring to Council in the near future.
If this passes, I really look forward to that, because I think it's an underutilized space in our city, and we could do so much better with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martman. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to support this motion. I'm happy to support investment in the heart of our city. I agree with Councillor Thorpe. I spend quite a bit of time downtown, and this summer, despite some of the challenges we're all very aware of, it's hopping and the restaurants are doing great business, and I think people are really coming out. I'm glad to see the tie-in with the new BIA. I am a little cautious about a revitalization plan costing $150,000 and then the potential for an implementation plan costing, significantly more. This isn't, I don't want people to think if we spend $150,000 then we're good. These often lead to more expenses down the way, but they're often very well tailored and consultation has happened. My question is regarding the funding source. So I don't believe we've ever had a funding source from PILTS. Could I just have some explanation there? And in forthcoming reports, we're also drawing on that. So if we could have a number as to how much is in there, how much is left, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons. So PILTS is payment in lieu of taxes, and that's the money we get from the port. And so that once we receive that money, it used to be $400,000 a year, and now going forward, it'll be based on assessment value. So that amount will be right now higher than 400,000. So what happens is they pay us, and we put that into a deferred revenue account. And then as projects come up, that we use that as a funding source. So I think historically we've kind of spent that money in the downtown core. I'll let Ms. Fullett get me the amount that we have currently in there, because off the top of my head, is it in there? It's just over $1.3 million that we have sitting in that account.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. What I'm fine with is I appreciate the work that we're going to be doing in the downtown. To me, $150,000 is an estimate. Like, it's not a fine budget. So what are we actually getting for $150,000? What does that actually pay for? Other than we're going to probably have a report on what needs to be done at the end. But what is it paying for throughout that report process?
Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So as part of this, we would, if we ultimately had the support to add this to the budget, we'd proceed with an RFP to engage a consultant who would come up with a strategy for engaging the community, the broader community, and as I mentioned, the BIA and council on the development of the plan. So a lot of that money goes towards the engagement strategy, and then a lot of that would go towards the writing and production of the plan that you've mentioned that would have a more detailed plan on standards and expectations for that quarter than what we currently have. We have some fairly high level policy right now in our downtown urban design strategy, but this would take it to a more detailed level, not a construction level design, but certainly a much clearer vision and detail of what we would expect to build out on Commercial Street in the coming years.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've done a lot of work on this area. We've had a mobility study done a couple of years ago. Do we actually need a consultant to do this work? And could we not, I mean, we have a no BNI down there. I know that they're going to be consulted on that. Could this not be their puppy to run with, so to speak?
Your Worship, I think this, on the surface, it may seem simple, but there's a number of factors in here. There's transportation, obviously significant transportation questions. There's servicing elements that we would have to look at and have to be considered. There's the general public realm, and I think it deserves the attention of a professional who has experience in public realm. Like, I think it's a significant project that we want to make sure we get right. So I think bringing in that external expertise would be very critical in making a successful project, and this money would go towards that expertise.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been through this before, and I think we need a modern design standard. Otherwise, we will replicate exactly what we have. We've been replacing trees. We've been putting in infrastructure improvements, but it's basically the same. We need to refresh our design standard, align it with what's going to happen on terminal and that environment, so that it's all a cohesive, modern standard. Maybe something a little more maintenance-free and accessibility
oriented. I think there's a chance to look at the width of the sidewalks into downtown and take a look at it from a special events point of view. One of the things you could do through this exercise is identify the needs for special events, put in the infrastructure underground, i.e. plug-ins and that type of thing to support those types of things. Maybe there'll be more road closures in the future for commercial. That could come out of this exercise where you could even design it for more pedestrian and people-oriented. What about more patios? What about all those types of things? What about the parking? What about the traffic flow right now? So there's a lot of things that the street furniture, the design elements for that. There's a lot that can go into this, and then this would inform the capital program for the next several years, and it ties in nicely with the work that's taking place on terminal in that environment. It's just a real opportunity, and with the new BIA, there's going to be tremendous, hopefully, input and buy-in from and influence from the folks that are directly impacted by that. So it's just a method of getting ourselves a very detailed plan, and I've seen these, and they'll produce nice diagrams and illustrations of what this should be, and it will inform all the departments on from plantings to bricks and mortar on how to proceed with their respective capital. So it's a thing that cities do. It's opportune to do this. It ties in with other work going on in the downtown, and I think it will generate an exciting product.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner, another one?
Just a quick one. If Mr. Rudolph mentioned looking at the width of the sidewalks, or could we look at getting rid of the sidewalks altogether and just have one great big plaza for all forms of transportation?
Yeah, through to Councillor Bonner. This is a visioning exercise, but it will lead to some decisions. So you may end up with stamped concrete on the road. There's all kinds of things that you could deal with on this. So right now, if we don't have this, we're kind of winging it, and we're going with what we have. And I think there's an opportunity, all things considered, to really revisit this. So it's definitely a pedestrian realm that could be even made more attractive, and tie in with Diana Crawl as well. And so it all flows, and some of the adjacent streets. So I feel with the right consultant and the facilitated process, we'll end up with a very exciting product.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a couple comments and a few questions. Thanks, Councillor Havens, for the question on funding sources. I'm always uncomfortable, I'm going to be very honest, when we get these big, not big amounts, but significant amounts coming from where I'm not totally clear on what aren't we considering it, because I do think those decisions are council. So again, I'll just reiterate, I do like that context in the reports, and for this agenda, I didn't have time to go through last year's budget. So, and those discussions. So I sometimes feel uncomfortable making these decisions because, and not for just this report, because I think there's a lot of great projects, but just cognizant that there's a balance that other interests may be there that I'm not aware of because I'm not thinking about them. So with that said, and I also feel like I need to plug here is my general belief that the city needs an urban design department. But my question through to Mr. Lindsay is this an urban design exercise? I'm getting a little hung up on the revitalization plan. Really, what does that mean? Are we talking about a robust urban design program for Commercial Street or other stuff?
Your Worship, I would best describe it as a public realm or urban design strategy for the area. I think the term revitalization always comes in discussions when you're talking about downtown and reinvestments in downtown. I'm not even sure that it might be a word that's outlived its usefulness. It's about the ongoing maintenance and investment in the heart of the downtown. So yes, I think it's a public realm strategy at the end, but like I said before, and others have said, it has to weigh in all those other factors of transportation and servicing, beyond just the public realm, but making sure that at the end of the day that it's a successful place, that it's a people place, that it's a place where people want to be and be seen. That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, thank you very much. In that event, I fully support this and will be voting in favor. And I would say, the absence of those street trees, even the ones that have been removed, are very, very noticeable. So yeah, and sometimes you don't realize what they add until they're gone. So I'm very supportive of this and would love to see love to see the final results, and I do hope it has a lot of street trees and that sort of thing that add a great look in the summertime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Martman, then Hemmens and Gesselbrock.
Thank you. I noted that this would be coupled with the implementation of the Terminal Nickel Reimagine Plan. I'm just wondering for the consultation, I understand that it's a multidisciplinary team of consultants. Do we anticipate what we may get presented back to us at council will have more than one option of what they are considering? Because sometimes we get presented one type of plan, and I'm interested in what are the various plans available.
Thank you, Rich. I think that's a good point. I think one of the first tasks of a consultant when we hire them would be to come up with an engagement strategy, and that would be not only an engagement strategy for the BIA and public, but also for council. So there was opportunities either at your council table or your GPC table early on to have a discussion and input on the project. So no, the intent is not to bring you a final project, but make sure that you're engaged throughout.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I suspect we're probably all on the same path here, but I do just want to point out, I pulled up the engagement summary from Reimagine Phase 1, and the top of Nanaimo's vision for the future is a thriving and diverse downtown. So I just want to highlight that this aligns very well with what we heard in Reimagine.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I was just hoping to move the recommendation.
Sorry?
It's already been moved?
It's already been moved.
Great. Well, I'll speak to it.
It's been a while, I know.
From the last council meeting when we were talking about the projects on Victoria and the bus exchange, that this is something that council strongly suggested that we get a urban design and of high caliber for Commercial Street to make sure that we tied in with this. And so I appreciate staff following through on that and bringing this forward. And I really look forward to seeing that and really hope in the design that there's a lot of focus on tying it into the work that we're planning to do on the corner there. And yeah, Councillor Brown, speaking of the trees, that would be good to see some return to that. I walked down Commercial during the heat dome, and man, that would have been nice to have a bit more canopy cover. So anyhow, thanks for bringing this forward, and I look forward to seeing what is proposed.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. The next is update on welcome poll at Swayalana Maffeo Sutton Park and request for additional funds. Mr. Groot, good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship, Council. So we have a report in front of you today just to provide an update on the project to raise a welcome pole at Maffeo Sutton Park. And what we have is it's been an ongoing project that started in discussion in 2018 and then was council supported in late 2020. And so what we've seen through the first half of 2021 is the design process, the discussions, the realization of what the welcome pole encompasses in regard to height, diameter, and then location. And so as a result of those details being somewhat finalized, the realization is that there's a bit of a funding shortfall. So the request and the recommendation is, oh, and also my apologies, is discussions around location. So location was visited, and site visits were had with the artist and with SFN and staff. And so the current location recommended is, as per the report, where the breaching orca is at Maffeo Sutton at the park. And so the recommendation is to propose the location as identified, and then also to amend the 2021-2025 financial plan to include an additional $50,000 for the installation of the welcome welcome pole funded from Council's Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. I don't also have staff present. If there's more discussion required or questions around the overall process and the communication, we can bring staff forward and have a more lengthy discussion on that if required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I realize there might be some questions of staff, but again, to get it on the floor, I will move the motion that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council A, approve the proposed location of the pole at Swayalana Maffeo Sutton Park as identified on attachment C to the staff report, and B, amend the 2021 to 2025 financial plan to include an additional $50,000 for the installation of the welcome pole funded from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. And again, I will speak to it briefly if I may.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Martman. Councillor Thorpe,
Thank
please.
you, Your Worship. Just to point out that this was a topic of discussion at the last POG meeting with SFN, and Chief Wise indicated very strongly his support for this project and what is being recommended in the report. So he seemed very pleased with how this is coming together, and I'm happy to support it, recognizing that it's an additional cost that we did not originally anticipate, but I think well worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question through to staff, probably finance staff, no offense, Art. But at a previous finance and audit, the last one or the one before that, and it went through to council, a good bunch of projects were approved for being flushed out for the next budget, with the majority of the funding sources being community work funds, strategic infrastructure reserve, and the special initiative reserve. Has that been done, and is there, because I remember more projects being approved than probably funding available, depending on how that played out. I'm just wondering, has this $50,000, even though it's only $50,000, is it accounted for with respect to all those projects that were
Ms. Mercer.
Through the chair to Councillor Brown. So we're in the process of funding the budget currently. We do have some funding constraints in some areas, but with regards to this $50,000, there is money in there to do that. So otherwise we would not have recommended this. Like I say, we're still working on the funding of the plan, so I can't fully comment on that right now.
Okay, so which brings me to my next question is, can PILTS pay for this? Or I guess my question is, if we're potentially running up against funding constraints about things that we've already in principle given approval to, I noticed there's a significant amount in the PILTS. That's great. I'm glad to see it finally there, and hopefully that will be a regular occurrence moving forward. Can the PILTS be used for those projects, or some of those projects, to make up funding gaps? Essentially, what I'm trying to make sure is that we're making decisions with council's making decisions with a complete understanding of our financial position.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, so we are looking at PILTS for funding other projects as well. With public art, which this is, there are some funding constraints. We can't use certain types of funding to fund public art. But I will have Ms. Fulla comment on it, as she's more familiar with the details of each funding source, and she's the one that does the funding. So
thanks.
Ms. Fulla, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Through the chair to Councillor Brown. So as Ms. Mercer said, we're in the process of funding the 10-year project plan that we'll be presenting to you in the fall. And of course, the first 5 years have to be fully balanced. As Mr. Mercer said, we do have some funding constraints and some challenges. We've been back to staff a few times to change the timing of projects and move projects around so that we can afford the plan that we want to put before you. So when these reports are coming to you right now, we're taking into consideration what I'm planning for 2022 to 2026 for funding, because every recommendation you approve here means there's less money available to fund the plan that we're going to bring to you in the fall. So we've taken that into consideration when we're making recommendations here, because we do have plans for the PILTS in the upcoming 5 years. And we also have to be conservative when we're looking at our funding so that we make sure we have funding available next year should unexpected expenses come up, or if a tender comes in over budget and we want to proceed with that project, we need to have flexibility in our reserves so that we can still proceed with those projects. So we are weighing all those options. But yes, there is definitely funding constraints, and some of the recommendations you made in May are putting constraints in the 2022 year as we work through them as staff.
Okay, yeah, the reason I'm asking is because I think we made fairly strong commitments towards projects. I'm thinking about the paddling center and the bike track, Westwood Park, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just trying to get a good grasp of, yes, it's only $50,000, but it all adds up and has impact. So, I want to make sure we can always put our money where our mouth is with respect to, our council decisions of saying, yeah, we're going to do this. So that's what I'm just trying to follow the bouncing ball here. So if I'm understanding this correctly, PILT has some criteria around it, and the public art is, well, you can fund anything out of the strategic infrastructure reserve, but that's where there's no constraints on the type of expenditure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown, and much appreciated. If the average consumer actually checked to see if there's money in the bank or limit on the visa, we'd probably be better off all around. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm assuming this would be through to Ms. Mercer or Mr. Groot. So I'm assuming the total cost of the project is $160,000, of which the city will be providing $100,000. Councillor Bonner, several meetings ago, suggested that there are grants available to the federal government for projects focused on Indigenous peoples. And I wonder if any consideration has been given to looking into funding from a source like that.
I think Ms. Bevan's going to give us an answer. Good morning, Ms. Bevan, and welcome.
Morning. Through the mayor, to Councillor Turley, I will say that the project initiator was Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre, and so they actually were able to secure a grant through Canadian Heritage to fund a portion of this project. So federal funding has been sought and received to support the Welcome Pool.
So yeah, I saw that in the report, but so that means that the city then cannot apply for additional funding for it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Bonner, and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Worship. I'm very much in support of this. I do have a couple of questions, and it's around public art and how we fund it. And we seem to be, this is a bit of a piecemeal thing, like we pulled some money out of unallocated public art fund to pay for the construction of the pole. And now we're pulling some money out of our strategic infrastructure fund to put the pole up. And I was wondering, we do have a cultural plan in place, and I'm just wondering if you could describe how the funding works for public art. And I would have thought that this would have been a fairly smooth thing coming out of a reserve specifically for public art. And I'm just curious as to why we're pulling things out of different places.
Ms. Mercer.
The chair to Councillor Bonner. We don't have a reserve specifically for public art, and we have an annual budget allocation, and it's escaping me off the top of my head exactly what it is. Ms. Fulla can probably correct me. So it's just, we have $50,000 in the budget annually for public art, and that has already been committed. I think with this project, we cobbled together some funding from 2020 as well as 2021 to fund the first $50,000, and that budget is now fully utilized. And the reason why we went to the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve is because that was there was no restrictions around that funding source for the second. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question or not.
Well, it sort of does, and I appreciate the answer. I guess the question I'm asking here is we have a culture plan that speaks to having a public art reserve fund, and we don't have one. So did we do something wrong at our end, or what happened to that?
And so when we were doing our reserve policy, we were unaware of that recommendation to have a reserve for public art. So that wasn't part of our when we structured that policy, and we weren't aware of that. So that's something we can look at for sure. But at this time, we don't have one.
Okay, we do have a recommendation in that plan to have I would certainly like to look at that coming up in the near future. I'm also interested in a letter we received from Nanaimo, and it's from Joan Brown. It's attachment C, I believe. And it specifically says, please note that the oral tradition is our highest internal protocol. And I was wondering if staff could tell me what that means to them. And I'm not going to hold anybody to it. It's kind of a question just popped into my mind.
I certainly don't want to speak for Joan Brown, but my understanding in speaking with her and receiving that email, she was indicating that having Chief Mike Wise and Councillor Regan Seward and herself present at that meeting that we held with representatives from the city and alongside representatives from Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre, having the chief there to speak to the project and to confirm his approval was the highest form of approval following their protocol, and nothing else on their end was required. In the past, we had also asked for an in-writing confirmation, and Joan was putting forward to us that having the chief there meant that he was supportive.
I see. Okay,
does that answer your
no,
question?
No, I think that's important to know is First Nations culture is very much based in oral traditions, as there was no written language. So I think that's important going forward as well to know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Himmons?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in full support of this recommendation, and following on Councillor Bonner's comments, I just want to offer my gratitude. This feels like it was a good process and a respectful process, and I deeply appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I hesitate to gild the lily, but all the comments have been timely and thoughtful this morning and much appreciated. You know, $50,000 to any individual in Nanaimo is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, however, in the context of our total budget, but the value we receive from this in terms of the necessary goodwill and the work towards reconciliation, I think far outweighs any monetary cost on this one, and I'm quite excited by the prospect of seeing this poll go up. So, having said that, seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Groot again, Community Program Development Grant, Nanaimo Climate Action Hub Society.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to yourself and Council. The purpose of the report is just to obtain Council approval of a request for a Community Program Development Grant. And the recommendation is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council approve the request from the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub Society for a Community Program Development Grant in the amount of $3,000 to assist in funding the Community Climate Circles program. And as per the report, every year there's an annual budget within the fund of $15,000, and currently it's undersubscribed for this year. I believe it's $3,500 is what's been drawn out of it, so there is $11,500 remaining, so there is no financial impact.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thanks. I will follow Councillor Thorpe's lead and put motion on the floor and then ask a question.
Excellent. Seconded, Councillor Bonner.
Yes, thank you,
Councillor Brown.
Through you to staff, first of all, supportive of this Climate Action Hub, is really engaged and very energetic, and so I think it's great to support them and see that, help them with some of that energy. The question I do have is, last week I was actually approached by a new organization that's forming. I just got their I think their status under the Societies Act and all that sort of thing, where I looked at this and they were looking for funding. And I note that, you know, they've missed the deadline and all those sort of things. But just to your comment that sort of undersubscribed, how do we handle that if there may be a great program opportunity that has sort of missed the deadline just due to when they've got off the ground. Do they have to wait till the next cycle, or do we have an alternative process?
I may look to, oh, yep, we have Ms. Warwick coming. I didn't know if it was a financial question.
And the reason I asked too is I think they intend to appear before council to request money, so I'm just trying to get ahead of it a little bit.
Ms. Warwick, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We certainly will accept a late application
Okay,
because we still have funding available.
perfect, great, thank you.
Very good. Anything further, Council? Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I reluctantly am not going to support this. I read the report carefully. I recognize it's only $3,000, and I don't think I've ever voted against something similar to this, but quite honestly, I see very limited value in this city money investment. I look at the report that says this is quite a new group that's organizing, and I recognized and know a couple of the names involved, and I respect their views, but basically it has a budget of approximately $16,000. Nearly half of that is used to pay what will be a coordinator. And when I look at the actions that this new group has taken, it seems to be mainly lobbying for their political agenda, which we might agree with or we might not. So I see one of the things that they did was they coordinated 60 emails to City Council in support of some initiative that they believed in. They coordinated another 77 emails to Council on another initiative that they believed in. Well, that's well and good, but I'm not convinced that Council or the City should be funding a political action group to pay a coordinator to get volunteers to lobby the City for their agenda. So I struggle with that, and for that reason, I'm not going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. Anything further? I'm going to support this, and I think it's based on the monetary amount, but I think Councillor Thorpe's comments are timely and need to be considered as we do fund various groups in the community. I think our first reliance always has to be on the staff who do good work for us, and that's certainly the basis of my decision. But I think it's a legitimate concern to be raised here today because the groups that maybe receive support from this council other groups will be supported by other councils, and I'm afraid it becomes a bit of a difficult road sometimes if we're seen to be supporting groups that are, in fairness, and not that it's a dirty word, more political in nature than they are in, how shall I say, community groups that provide services to the community. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to overburden council with this morning. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Councillor Thorpe for his comments. I actually had I had a bit of a laugh when I read the report because there have been conversations at this table of, oh my gosh, we're getting so many emails on this topic. I would argue that we actually do support other community groups who have a mandate of lobbying and who have wide networks that they mobilize in support of particular initiatives that we are making decisions on. The Climate Action Hub is dealing with an emergent and critical issue, and I don't see anyone else organizing to the same degree on such an important issue. So for me, this is a really easy decision to make. Sometimes seeing that, we've received 150 emails, I understand Councillor Thorpe's points, but I disagree. I think this is a really good expenditure of our dollars.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I'm just echoing Councillor Hemmons' comments. And for this amount of money, in the report, it talks about the residents are concerned about our climate change. And many of them don't know where to start. And this type of organization helps engage the community and helps to have more of a voice when it comes to these types of issues and the opportunities that might be available for us in our city. So for this amount of money, I think we're getting a really good investment in more engagement in our community and help with climate change. Thank you.
I am resisting only weakly, very weakly, not to respond to this and say, when the group comes before us that may not support the general views of council on this issue as an example this morning, that may take a somewhat contrary view or a different approach. I appreciate Councillor Hemmond's comments, but once you start down this road, you have to be very careful. And I say that in all seriousness. The unpopular views versus the popular views change over time. And I wouldn't like to think that another council after us would happily support a group that I would not support normally, as opposed to this proposal, because the precedent is established and you have to act fairly. There are people, for instance, and I had this discussion this morning with some staff already around vaccination. There are intelligent, thoughtful people in our community who believe that vaccination is a bad thing. The most of us don't. We think it's a wonderful thing. And I'm just saying that as we consider these questions, I think this is something to keep in the back of our mind, that if you support one that is seen to be or perceived to be even, or is in fact largely political in terms of generating emails or lobbying council on issues, then you have to be prepared to potentially and arguably and legitimately and fairly fund other groups that may not support your views. In any event, I'll leave it at that. All those in favor and contrary? Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Turley, thank you very much. Motion carries. The next is the cancellation of Bevan Douglas split heat pumps. Mr. Groot.
Thank you, Worship. Last one for me today. It's just a report to let council know about a project cancellation regarding some ductless heat pumps at Bevan Social Centre. The project, for council's information, was initiated several years ago kind of as a response to some aging infrastructure and older systems that aren't easily changed between heating and cooling, and they don't respond quickly to that kind of demand. But since these projects were initiated and entered into the financial plan, staff are undergoing a review with a consultant regarding emerging technology, different opportunities, and so staff thought it prudent to cancel this project just to ensure that there wasn't an expenditure of dollars around a technology that might not be compatible with what we move forward with in the near future. So that's basically where the cancellation had come out of.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Root? Councillor Martman, or are you left over from before? Sorry. No questions. Thank you for the report. Appreciate it. The next is Nanaimo Operations Centre Phase 2 Environmental Assessment. That's Mr. Sims. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. Just briefly, the report in front of you is just to provide a brief bit of status report on where we're at with the currently named Nanaimo Operations Centre. We couldn't resist the acronym. As Council may recall, in September of last year, you approved $200,000 towards an architect to develop the site plan and concepts around to support a business case for the redevelopment of the Operations Centre. So the current concept sort of looks at 3 or 4 different projects, including incorporation of parks operations staff and the redevelopment of the public works facility as a whole as it's operating, incorporating some upgrades to the fire training center beyond what Chief Doyle was talking about earlier, and then some redevelopment of the Prideaux Street Parks Yard to suit different needs of the parks operations. And then lastly, the sort of redevelopment potential for the so-called Parks Operations Annex at Nanaimo Lakes Road, the old Reservoir Number 1 property. Briefly, and this information will be forthcoming as the business case develops in the fall, but briefly, the entire operations facility, both for parks and for public works, is outdated and is no longer serving the needs of the community. But in the development of this business case, we've undertaken what we would refer to as a stage 1 environmental assessment, or a desktop study of potential areas of contamination or potential contamination. And there are some areas, as outlined in the report, due to historic activities. It's not uncommon in an industrial setting. But to gain a little bit of assurance of the extents of that contamination, we're proposing and recommending to the committee that you approve some additional budget to go back and do some mapping, drilling, and investigation into the sources of contamination and determine the size of it. This will help sort of put some bounds on the overall costs of any environmental remediation that would occur. I'd be happy to, as council's noted, the proposed funding source is payments in lieu of taxes, as was discussed earlier. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Questions? Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. I am happy to support the recommendation. This is a question a bit outside the scope of the project or the report, but I happen to go by the operations center of the school district almost every day, and I'm curious, have we looked at partnering opportunities with other organizations in the city that require similar operations and infrastructure that we do at the operations center?
I think that's an excellent point, Your Worship. The school district does have similar needs. They run a number of facilities, and the city, in the foreseeable future, not too distant future, we may have needs for satellite yards as well. So there is that opportunity to trade back and forth. I think the site on Labia feels large, but when you start to sort of shoehorn all of the current uses into it, it becomes rather constrained. But I think the point is excellent, and I will be taking it up with the colleagues at school district.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very similar question. Will, the RDN does have some transit operations and some smaller park operations. And I'm just curious, have conversations occurred with the RDN as well about potential co-location? Even if you do run up against site constraints, I'm just wondering if we've started those conversations.
At this point, Your Worship, not with directly with transit, but there's the opportunity for refueling of compressed or liquid natural gas for our fleet. So that's a possible discussion point.
Okay, so discussions will be occurring?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. If Council's ready, I'll move that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council increase the budget for the Public Works Facility conceptual design by $100,000 in order to undertake a Stage 2 environmental site investigation funded from payments in lieu of taxes.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any further discussion or questions, Mr. Sims? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. I'm noting we have a recess at 10:30, and I'm going to suggest we take it now before we get into the next item, if that's acceptable to council. So we'll take a recess for 10 minutes. Thank you. Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in, it just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Oh, hey, Tiana.
Hey.
It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So What we did is we've replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here, in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City of Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, complete the lighting request form, and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make a replacement. In the roads today, we're doing our Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed, which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside borders. From here we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on, so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our 2 sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me. We have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is pushing the transfer tape a little tighter to the vinyl. And then from there, we peel it back, our plastic, which basically leaves us with a big sticker. We put it on the aluminum. And when we're done here, we take our transfer tape off, and as you can see, we're left with Dundas.
The next is item G, ending the BC Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. Carib, and that's Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is perhaps a bit of an unusual report to appear on a Finance Committee agenda, but with the next item on your agenda, we felt it was appropriate to be here and coherent. So this just to provide that further context. As you can see in the report, since 2007, most municipalities in British Columbia have joined the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program as part of signing on to the Community Climate Action Charter. And Nanaimo was right there at that early stage. And the program requires municipalities to report out on their GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and in turn refunds the carbon taxes that we would pay on those emissions. And so this has provided a fairly steady stream of funding, a predictable, sustainable stream of funding for city operations, and it's been used to fund several, GHG reducing projects, everything from LED light conversions within our facilities to heating upgrades, etc. So I believe, as noted in the report, it's about $1.3 million in benefit over the 10-year life. As recently as May, the province has shifted their focus to Clean BC, which is an excellent program, but have sort of, as part of that, have removed this sort of predictable funding stream. On the positive side, they've also removed the requirement for reporting, which is fairly challenging. The challenge that comes with this is there's the Clean BC program is in with the other competitive grant programs, and so it's fairly consuming for staff to prepare grant proposals to provincial government without guarantees of success on many of them. And I think that's what sort of sticks in the craw of many municipalities. So UBCM and a number of municipalities are lobbying the province to replace the CARIP program with something that is similar, a sustainable, predictable source of funding. So that's really the recommendation in front of you here today, is that Council write to the province, to the Premier and Minister of Climate Change Strategy, Environment and Climate Change Strategy, asking for a replacement to this program. Be happy to take any questions as well. Ms. Fulla and Mr. Paminger are here on details of the program as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Brown.
I'd like to move the recommendation and then speak to it if I may.
And seconded Councillor Hemmons, and please.
Thanks. Very, great to see this on here. We had similar at the RDN submitting a UBCM resolution. I think the move here by the province is problematic for two reasons. The first is the manner in which they went about it. Just to think it was like a Friday email to everybody, and everybody knows what type of email you send on a Friday. Really no consultation. And even if the program was going to end, I think some dialogue there about the reasons why or their shift in focus, and that has sort of trickled out afterwards, but that's been fundamentally reactive to, I think, something that they should have foreseen, and that local governments would, of course, be upset or have questions about this. The second thing, and this may be a little bit more philosophical in terms of higher level government funding, is I actually think this is a fundamentally step in the wrong direction, where you're taking consistent funding sources that are reliable, as Mr. Sims highlighted, non-competitive in the sense that they're not grant applications. We've seen the FCM and some of the federal parties commit to the expansion of the community work funds programs. For that very reason, is that it actually probably produces better projects. How often do local governments have to rework their capital planning or their project development because, yeah, there's money on the table, but it's not a perfect fit with how we go about doing our business. So to end a consistent source of funding and roll that up into, or maybe, as they say they are, into other programs, to me is really actually a regressive approach about where we need to be going with how we see transfers to the body of government that carries the biggest burden and has the least flexible taxation. So highly supportive of this, and ultimately, I hope that discussions like this will lead to bigger discussions about how transfers are occurring and municipalities are receiving upper level government funds to fund their programs. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. That was very thoughtful, and I agree with everything you said. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Question to staff. The reporting on community carbon emissions, that was tied in with this program, and so that's been scrapped as well?
Your Worship, that's correct. There's no longer a requirement on staff or the city or participating municipalities to report on their emissions, which also removes a fairly detailed database from the province. Where are we going and how are we getting there? So it'll be very interesting to see how the province proposes to replace that information.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very appreciative that staff have put together this letter. I must say that the decisions around the stopping of CARP is frustrating on multiple levels and short-sighted, and I really do hope that the province is listening to the feedback that they're getting from municipalities and working to replace CARP with something even better. So I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, motion's been made. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The final item is Sustainability and Emission Reduction Reserve Funds. Ms. Mercer and Ms. Fuller.
Thank you. So this report ties in with obviously the previous one. So currently the city has two statutory reserves that support energy or emission reduction projects and initiatives. So the first one is the Sustainability Reserve Fund, and this supports plans as well as projects and initiatives that meet established payback criteria and reduce the city's energy consumption or lower greenhouse gas emissions. And the funding for this reserve comes from the CARP funding. And we get approximately, on average, about $137,000 a year that goes into this reserve. So, and as Mr. Sims stated, in May of this year, we learned that this program, the CARP funding, was going to be ending, and 2020 was our last year that we would receive funding for this. So this reserve now has no annual funding source. So our second reserve is the Emission Reduction Reserve Fund, and it supports project plans and initiatives that reduce the city's CO2 emissions. So the funding for this reserve is a calculated amount based on the GHGs calculated as part of the CARP reporting, and that's at $25 a ton, and it is funded from general revenue. So the funding for this reserve has been declining since 2018, and as a result of garden waste collection and credits for organic diversion have increased substantially. This results in lower GHGs for the calculation of the contribution to this reserve. So as these two funding changes, as a result, staff is recommending that these two reserves be consolidated into one, which we would keep the Emission Reduction Reserve Fund and close the other reserve, and set an annual funding allocation of $165,000 going into this reserve and each year. So this will provide a more sustainable funding source for project planning, so they'll know what's going into that every year and can fund projects accordingly. And it also significantly reduces the amount of staff time that it takes to calculate the budget for those reserves. And so the change that we're recommending would result in an approximate 0.1% tax increase, property tax increase. And if council is agreeable to this change, staff will update the Emissions Reduction Reserve Fund bylaw and bring it back in September for adoption. So I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council, one, direct staff to include in the 2022 to 2026 draft financial plan for Council consideration a new funding strategy for the emission reduction reserve based on an annual allocation of $165,000. And two, direct staff to transfer the balance in the Sustainability Reserve Fund to the Emission Reduction Reserve Fund and return to Council with an updated Emission Reduction Reserve Fund bylaw that includes supporting both energy and emission reduction projects and initiatives.
Thank you very much. Seconded. Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Ms. Robertson, we have no other business. Any question period questions? I don't think we have any. Sorry, Councillor Martman.
I might have just not marked it down, but when we came back after our break, I didn't realize that we'd done the Nanaimo Operations Center. Did we do that prior to our break?
No, after.
The conceptual design.
Yes, that was Mr. Sims's presentation on the environmental assessment.
What? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So it wasn't intended to be a presentation on that initiative. A full business case presentation will be taking place in the fall, early fall on that and the RCMP initiative. This was just, he put a little context on why we were asking for funding to do an environmental level 2 assessment.
Okay, thank you.
No, nothing for question period. Motion for adjournment. Moved, Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Staff, council.